Welcome. My name is Len Lane, and I am the founder and president of Brokers for Life, Inc., and we are Dominion Lending Centers in Western Canada. The topic of our podcast will be about what we consider to be real-life mortgage solutions. Welcome back. My guest this morning is, once again, Cheryl Wilkes. Cheryl Wilkes has a strong history in dealing with rentals, not only as an owner, but to the point where mortgage brokers all over Alberta send her their real estate files, especially when there's over like a dozen or so rentals in the portfolios, right? So let's maybe talk about where your passion for rentals comes from, because as long as I've known you, you've had one on the go at least.
I think it was just sort of one of those things where, you read a book, and I can say that the sort of initial, I don't even want to call it an education, but you're very impressionable in your early 20s. And I read good old Rich Dad, Poor Dad that everybody's probably heard of at this point, good old Kiyosaki. And it just sort of stirred that, hey, maybe there's something else out there outside of pension plans and things like that when it comes to retirement and investments and growing your wealth. I was lucky enough for quite a while, as we chatted about actually on the last one, that I worked a corporate job for a very long time, which helps you qualify for some of this stuff. I also moved quite a bit. So every time I moved, I didn't really want to be a renter, even when it was like cities, right? Like Fort McMurray and Calgary and Edmonton, Leduc, like a whole bunch of places. So it was always figuring out, okay, where does the down payment come from and all this stuff. But I've always really liked real estate. You get a tangible, you get a something, you know what I mean? I didn't understand stocks. I didn't understand any of that stuff, but I did know enough to know that there's very likely not a good old, the government's going to save you and your pension plan's going to kick in later in life for me. So it was sort of like, well, figure yourself out, get good at something, understand something, and then sort of some of my rentals just sort of became default rentals because it didn't make sense selling them maybe when I moved. A lot of them can kind of like that, where it just bought a good property, right?
Those would be the Fort McMurray ones, perhaps? No.
Yeah, they're probably now, let's be honest. I mean, they're the bane of my existence at this point, let's be honest about it. But you know what? I can tell you, I know people up that own property up there that they've had just horrendous luck and horrendous tenants and all kinds of things. Have I had some speed bumps, we'll call them? Sure. Fires and floods like everybody else. And I was affected by both, but they're still standing, and tenants are lovely in both places that I've still got up there. And, landlording is just, it's one of those things that you either are okay with it or it's an absolute hard stop no. And it doesn't take much to realize what side of that fence you're on, I don't think.
No, I'd have to agree. I think I had 4 at one point in my life. And the hardest thing to do was because they weren't in my backyard. They were Fort Saskatchewan, they were the other side of town. Taking the time and effort to watch over them, I guess, if you want to say, is very demanding. There's no question. And or finding someone good to take care of them for you seems to be not the easiest thing to do either.
That was definitely my battle with Fort McMurray. I tried a couple different property management companies, and everybody fell short, to be honest. But I mean, the hard part was, a lot of them were also in the industry doing other things that when the market was good, they made more money doing it. So it kind of just went to the wayside. It's unfortunate, but it is the way in the industry, right? To find a good property manager, they're out there and there's lots of them, but I just sort of realized that I'm okay with doing the drive and I'm okay with communicating with them. And I've had pretty good luck. And I've also got a pretty good lineup of sort of what I'm going to call support team up there now in Fort Mac. I've got an appliance guy. I've got a handyman. I've got a realtor who's a really good friend of mine who's helped me out a couple times over the years with just, I pay one of his agents a couple bucks to open a door and do a showing for me type of thing. You know what I mean? It does take it takes a village sometimes, right?
And having those backup people, I guess if you want to call it, the support people that can go in and somebody is willing to go in and fix a doorknob or do something like that is crucial. I had one where I was paying the guy that, only he never went into the house evidently, because when I finally kicked the tenant out, the power and gas had been shut off for almost 3 months.
Oh,
So
lovely.
tells me pretty close that he'd never gone inside the the place, or he only went in daylight. I guess maybe, I don't know, but yeah, no, that's definitely a part of the challenge of being a landlord, I guess, right?
Yeah, you just, like I said, you just pick and choose where your investments go, in my opinion, right? Rentals just happen to be up my alley. I understood them, now in the industry, so it makes it even easier to understand them and just sort of know all the quirks. But you definitely learn as you go. There's tripping points and there's things that you're like, this is going to be great, and then you realize it's not. Right? It's like any investment. There is risk and reward.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The
Right?
stock market is like that too. It's risk and reward, and it's
100%.
it's a lot of risk usually, right? And there's nothing that you can do to stop something from going sideways in stocks. That's for sure. So you see a lot of portfolios. I've always thought that condos were maybe not the best investment, only because of the condo fees are out of your control as well. But in the portfolios, do you see usually a good mix of condo and single family, or what do you see?
I find it's a personal opinion. I've talked to people that, and you're probably going to get some messages or some pokes or hate on this answer. It depends. It depends on where you live. It depends on what you're buying. It depends on what zone you're in, right? Like, I personally, it's funny, actually, a lot of mine are condos. Granted, some of them are condos I lived in myself and loved. Own in nice areas in Southwest Edmonton. I have good quality tenants. Like, I know people that buy condos close to the university. You know what kind of tenant you're getting. And maybe you only get a tenant for 8 months a year, but you get a premium for it. And then some of those people are Airbnb-ing it, type of thing, if the condo allows for it, for example. So I find it's a catch-22. I agree, condo fees can be the bomb in the middle of it if they skyrocket, if they go up because they are out of your control. But on the flip side, the maintenance level is different on a condo because a lot of it is under the condo board. So it's a catch-22. The prices are lower in condos normally, so people can get in, like the point of entry is lower for that type of thing. I find it just depends on what type of tenant you want, right? Like, I know people that have bought apartments downtown and rented them out for astronomical amounts of money, but they furnish it and it's executive. And they have like executive rentals. They're renting to these people for $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month in Edmonton, which is like ridiculous on a condo. But it's like everything included. It's furnished to the nines. Like, I think it just depends on what your appetite is for what type of tenant and what type of rental you want.
Right. And that's a good point on the maintenance, right? The condo fee is basically your maintenance cost, short of, interior paint, floor. That's about all you can change in them anyway. So it's, if you kind of look at it that way, I guess. I always see, though, when you get that $500 condo fee in the package, it's like it just kills everything else, it seems sometimes. But
sometimes it does, for sure. And I mean, I've lived it, right? Like my townhouse in Fort McMurray, I think most people heard about the house that blew up when they turned the gas lines back on again. I wasn't very far from that, and I came home to foundation cracks in my townhouse that one of them was within a foot of my power box. So it was ridiculous. Like, it was insane. I was like, how does this happen? I have no idea. But the condo board spent I don't know, probably $30,000 on it. And I got a whole new basement done. And all I had to do was help them source a contractor because obviously at that point, post fires, like nobody was in town. And like, so I mean, I did probably more than what some people do within the condo board realm of like getting things done. And I was able to sort of stay in contact with the contractor and get kind of updates. So it's kind of nice because I was a little more involved than maybe normally. But it was like, okay, so now I don't have to mess around with getting my insurance company to look into this and deal with this. And you know what I mean? It probably would have fallen under insurance, but it was a bit of a weird situation, of course, right?
Yeah.
So condo board immediately, foundation is their jam, whatever the source is on it. Got it done. I basically have probably the best foundation in the whole block now at this point because it was inside, outside, you name it. They dug it all up and whatever. But it was just one less stress for me to have to worry about, right? And that could have been super pricey out of pocket.
And getting household insurance to pay for that, I don't know that they would have even touched it, right?
And I've had one basement flood due to just bad drainage and bad luck. and lots of rain, and it cost us $40,000 because the insurance company was like, sorry, it's not sewer line, it's overland water, or whatever the wording was that they gave me.
That's exactly the wording. It's called overland water. It's you didn't grade your property correctly and it floods your basement. That's not the insurance problem. Right?
And that was the craziest part. We didn't even know it wasn't done properly. It was the contractor we'd hired and all the things you don't know about drainage. But we had water coming over the side of a eaves trough into a window well, and then it went up in the window well and straight in the window in the basement.
That will do it. So had it been a condo, that would have been the condo board's problem, I guess, right?
Exactly, right? So it's a catch-22, right? In my opinion, on you take your risk and you take your rewards where you can, as long as your condos are good. Like I've got one right now, like listed for sale, just because I was like, yeah, it's time. The condo fees have been going up a little lately, and it's a good condo. It's still in great shape. It's still, it's a good condo board and property management company. But I was kind of just like, yeah, I'm at my threshold.
Yeah.
I think it's time to go and move the money somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And that's, and you guys are doing that. You're building several rentals, if I'm not mistaken, as well, right?
Yeah. Well, we're just getting the drywalling phase. On the infill where we can actually put it publicly up for sale because people then can safely tour it and all that kind of good stuff. But that's sort of the thought on liquidating a couple of rentals is sort of shifting it over to some of the infill construction stuff. And then the goal for us is to kind of, build 2, maybe 3 a year and probably keep one.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, a lot of mortgage brokers who don't want to deal with rental portfolios send that business to you. So how much of a difference, for years we just had the 50% offset with CMHC, of course, right? If you were doing something that's pretty much what you had to deal with. How much of a difference has using the mortgage calculators made to that part of the business?
Every person I talk to that's like talking rentals, buying rentals, refinancing rentals, all this kind of stuff, like I tell them, I'm like, it is a moving target. Rentals are an absolute moving target. Everybody's got a slightly different way of doing things. Is it on your taxes? Yes, no. Could it be on your taxes? What do you have for paperwork? Where is it? What's like? It's one of those things that like every single person is the same but different. It's a heck of a lot of paperwork. Some investors don't know what they're up against when it comes to some of this paperwork and lists that we give them. Some of them are incredibly organized. They know exactly what to expect. And they know that they're more work to us, right? They appreciate your time. They appreciate that you have the knowledge base and all this kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a spectrum, right? In terms of just setting an expectation with all these folks to say, hey, listen, like we can probably figure this out, but I need everything up front to be able to do some number crunching and look into what your options are. And your options, may or may not be the rate you Googled and found online, of course. This is the other fun thing with investors is that I have new investors who they haven't been through the process. They don't understand it yet. The biggest step, I think, in being the mortgage broker and being that professional is setting that expectation of like, hey, these rates are not the same as the house you just moved into. They're totally different. It's a different risk level for the lenders. You may not qualify with every single lender. I might only have 2 to pick from based on the size of your portfolio or your incomes or debts or whatever that may be. So it's kind of setting that, like, I will give you any and every solution I can find you, but then you have to pick what works best for you.
Right. And that's probably the biggest challenge, I think, for most of them, right? That understanding. Obviously, you did a lot of work with RAIN over the years. What was that Mortgage Broker of the Year for them as well? Was that kind of that title?
It was one of the years. Yeah. And I mean, the Real Estate Investment Network is great. They've been around for decades and there's people across the entire country, right? And oddly enough, I did not join as a mortgage broker. I joined as an investor.
Right.
I had zero interest in actually, funny enough, finding business out of that. I was like, nope, I'm the same as everybody else. I'm going to sit at the table and I'm going to learn all these things for my own portfolio. And the problem is that, as is the way, when you're good at what you do and you know what you're talking about, people tend to gravitate towards it and they ask you all the questions and then they want you to be their broker. So it's
not a bad thing.
I don't want to say by accident, but it was sort of not actually my original intention. I was focusing on my own portfolio, not my business. And then it just sort of became that where, a chunk of business comes in and I've had, good friends through that now. I have like clients who started a full blown, coaching and investing program. Wayne and Gabby run a great program. right? I've known them for a very long time and helped them with their own mortgages and some of their like mentees and all this kind of stuff, right? So it's a bit of a sort of cycle that came back around again.
Yeah, well, and not a bad one. Like I said, when you have other mortgage brokers sending you their business because they don't really want to deal with it, it's a good thing. So,
Yep.
We get asked this question all the time: should I start a Holdco for my rental portfolio? I have mixed emotions about that. It's really an accounting question, but
Yes.
what do you see in at what point is it an advantage, I guess, for someone to actually
So
have a Holdco?
the general biggest hole in that comment people have is that they don't understand what a Holdco is. They're like, I'm self-employed. I own a company that makes money. I want to buy real estate in that company. No, that is not a Holdco. That's an active co.
Right.
And you are not allowed to have real estate and your active income. And it's funny because I've asked a bunch of lenders over the years, and the easiest answer I generally get back is, well, guess what? If something happens, we don't want your business going under and dragging the property with it that we're looking after for you. Vice versa, if something happens with the house, we don't want your business going under because of it. So they have to be separate. So for some people, accounting, again, this is where your accountant comes in. How is it set up? How does it work? Because for 90% of people, they go open an extra company, a secondary company. I'm going, well, there's no tax benefits at that point because you're still pulling it out of your active company, paying the money, and then you're moving it into a Holdco. It's wasteful. There's less options in Holdcos in terms of lender options.
Yeah.
A lot of them have small but premium sometimes to their rates. And the other thing is, let's be honest, at the end of the day, owning and running an incorporation, anybody who's self-employed knows this, comes with bookkeeping costs, and your accountant is more expensive. So I have people ask me this all the time. They're like, I'm going to do a Holdco. It's going to be tax beneficial. And I'm going, well, yeah, maybe, but probably not. Because if you're making $200 a month in cash flow, great. But if your accountant costs you $2,000 a year between bookkeeping and accounting filing, your $2,400 in cash flow just became $4,000. Put it on your personal name. Like, you personally guarantee it anyways. If it's residential, it's the same qualifying rules. You're still on the hook for that mortgage. It's not like your company's taking that liability. And a lot of people do think that there's I feel like it's more of an American concept, but they feel like they're kind of indemnified by putting it in a company. Like, they can't get sued. And I'm like, you can pull a registration at the land titles office, right? Like, they know who owns that company.
Right. Yeah,
so
quite easily.
Here's the thing. Down the road, sure, if you have a large portfolio, if you're getting into multifamily type stuff, a lot of that stuff goes into corporate, of course, right? I have a Holdco myself, but I had it set up with my accountant properly in terms of those tax benefits to flow it from my active to my hold without me involved. But that's not the easiest thing to do and not the easiest thing to set up. And even I'm considering dissolving it because it's sort of well, it's good-ish, but I'm paying that professional extra money for all these extra things that I could just throw it on my personal taxes, call it a day, right?
And I think that's the one thing that about the government has changed it so much on holding another company of any kind, right? We actually did it with our own, where we changed my marketing company, dissolved it. I'm just sole proprietor now. But obviously own brokers for life. But to pay myself, I'm just a sole proprietor, right? So
exactly, right. I mean, it's one of those things where sure, maybe it makes sense. I don't know, but if you're brand spanking new and you're just getting started, leave all your options open for lenders. Leave all your options open for what you can qualify for, what you can do. And then if you want to look at moving things down the road, great. Let's strategize that. Let's plan that. Let's talk about that so that you can plan forward not to fail.
Exactly. And just off the top of my head, I can only think of 2 of our lenders that actually will do a Holdco. Am I right?
Yeah.
Scotian.
I mean, the alternate guys, sure, but no brand new business owner wants to hear about alt rates. Let's be honest, right?
It's 7% today. Yeah.
they're good for your local self-employed person like me, who now qualifies for a bit of bubkiss squat because I went and bought the forever home with my spouse. But but it made sense, and it cash flows, and it that's the thing. When I did the math, I was like, it doesn't really matter. It's just a cost of financing. But that's not the mentality that a lot of people have. they look at interest rates like it's the most important thing in the whole wide world. And I'm like, your payments make sense. Your interest is a write-off technically, but it's still a part of your finances and your costs.
It's cost, right? That's the part that they miss, I think.
100%. Yeah. But it's, again, that's setting that expectation with people.
Yeah, exactly. So
they can make sense. They cannot make sense. It depends on how it's set up. It's case by case, right? And most people, I'm like, here's my view. It's just my personal opinion. Take it for what it is. Go talk to your own accountant. Because, the other big thing I've noticed over the years is that accountants really they know how to structure things. They know how to help you save money on taxes, but they don't understand the active Holdco necessarily unless they have clients that are in that realm, or they have it themselves sometimes, right? Like some of them have their own investments, like my accountant does, right? So when he and I were setting things up, he's like, yep, this is what you want, right? So it really is a catch-22 on that, who owns and who pays the taxes. And like you said, the feds love to change their minds on how taxation works. And they've changed it in the corporate world so drastically in the last decade that where it used to be dividends, now it's like, T4s are fine. Like you do you pick you, and there's no real major benefit difference.
No, that's what we found too. I was paying double taxes. I was paying because we would take dividends out of the company, but it didn't reduce the income of the company, so the tax I was paying, personal tax as well as paying other tax. So, and that's I think when people look at rentals, we hear that all the time. I don't know if some of the organizations or, like you said, the mentoring people suggest Holdcos from the start, because I've heard that at least a half a dozen times in the last 6 months, I'm sure.
Again, I think it depends on what people are doing. Like I've heard, coming out of some of the larger groups, and some of it's shifted, right? Like there's what's his name, Scott McGilvery type thing. He's got a big network across the country, and they do teaching courses and training. I haven't actually been to any of their things. I did an intro thing once with my spouse, but we didn't end up being members. But he has coached a bunch of people actually in Ontario that are a part of that network on multifamily. And it really is one of those things that, sure, maybe if you're doing like flips where there's money in and money out and you have the capital gains to pay or things like that, maybe that makes more sense because it's jacking up your personal income if you have capital gains. But the most recent shift that takes effect in June is not going to come. You know what I mean? Like corporate is automatically that 66%. There's no $250,000 allowance in corporate side right now from what we can find and what we found and searching everything on CRA. So again, some of these people in Holdcos, it's not going to make sense because you're automatically paying the government more money when you sell it. And if you sell it at a profit, which let's be honest, buy low, sell high is always the thing that people want to go for, you're automatically giving the government like 17, 18% more in terms of the capital gains immediately.
Yeah, no. Just personal opinion, no.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the thing. So again, that's the conversation with the accountants where, does it make sense? I have no idea anymore. Like I talk to my accountant enough and I'm on track with him and I talk to him and keep him organized that like, it's one of those things that, it's good, but maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Again,
it's kind of that like, right? Sort of, maybe kind of, I don't know, talk to the professional that does your taxes because I don't.
So the best advice for buying rentals is talk to your accountant before you do anything else. See if it's worth
totally. Just get some advice because sure, if you're self-employed and you don't pay yourself much and adding on a rental or two isn't going to change your taxation, great.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if you make a couple $100,000 on your T4s out of your corporate job, maybe it makes more sense at that point. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely an accountant question, but it's something that we hear way too often as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not sure.
I get asked it a lot too.
Who's suggesting that? I don't know who that is, but anyway, Cheryl, again, I thank you for your time. I hear you have dinosaur pancakes in your future, so
I do.
We better let you go spend the rest of your long weekend taking care of the boys. So,
yes.
Thanks again. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you found the information that we provided to be useful in your mortgage journey. And remember, you can always find our associates at www.brokersforlife.ca/associates. Have a great day.